Alright guys, I'm gonna try to keep it concise here so I can get to the review, but I recently had the idea to start reviewing some of the games. Of course this one's Borderlands 3, but I just felt like I wanted to give my honest opinion on some video games just for my friends and just so they see what games I play. And I'm gonna review them based on several different aspects and score them based on those aspects. All the highlighted words are the aspects that are gonna be graded. They're gonna be graded from 1 to 10. I'll show the score as we go, but the two big categories are gameplay and game design. Under gameplay, it is split into layout and depth. Layout then splits into originality and difficulty, which are two of the big aspects I kind of consider. Depth then splits into progression and replayability, also very important. Game design, as you can see, splits into story, style, and optimization. 3 categories instead of 2. The story consists of characters, dialogue, and setting, which I'm going to be grading. Style, which consists of visuals and audio. And optimization, which consists of bugs and performance. All these scores from the splits will result in a statistical score, which is still biased, but I don't consider that score like... It's like half true, half false. But it's a good estimate of like how statistically good it is. And that will be added up with my personal score that I gave the game and averaged for a final score. Alright guys, here are all the characters I have. This is my qualifications for the review, and I mean I got like a day on it, 2 days pretty much on this character, a day on this character, like 2 days on this character, only 2 hours on this character, 9 hours on this character, and like almost 5 days on my main. But like those are my qualifications. I've definitely played this game enough, and I've played through all the DLCs. The only main content that I haven't played is the Malawon takedown, but I have done the Guardian takedown. However, I have seen the Malawon takedown, and I could probably do it. Okay, so our first category is going to be originality. And originality is kind of like how much new stuff they introduced into the game, and like from the previous title, so like from Borderlands 2. But like not just also the previous game, but like in the genre in general. Because like the looter shooter category is kind of the same throughout every game. It's kind of the same grind, I'm not gonna lie. But Borderlands 3 did a good job adding stuff. They added, one of the major things they added was like the multiple active abilities between each character. So like, for example, Amar has like 3 action skills in like each skill tree or something. And they also have individual augments, which also kind of diversify builds as well. And for Zane example, like you can have 2 action skills. That was a very good introduction into the game. Another thing that they added that I really liked was the fact that they got rid of slag, because slag was a major factor whether your build was good in Borderlands 2, and it made most builds not viable. In my opinion, like it was just like almost a hassle to play any character besides Salvador, because Salvador, the fact that he could dual wield and have a slag weapon made him so much better. And they replaced it with radiation, which, I mean, radiation's, I mean, nobody really strives to get radiation unless you're playing for the lag, or like the anointment. But, also they added the, mantling and the movement, which is very smooth. Guardian ranks. Guardian ranks are pretty much just reskin badass ranks. They pretty much do the same thing, except you get perks. I mean, the perks are kind of nice. Yeah, the perks are actually really nice, I'm not gonna lie, because there's one that every time you damage an enemy while you're down, it extends the fight for your life duration. That's pretty necessary, and like the health whenever you get up, that's pretty nice. The co-opetition mode, that was pretty original. It made the game more enjoyable with your friends, because in Borderlands 2 there was like huge gaps between when you could play with your friends or not. So I had like 18 characters on Borderlands 2, each at like different levels. I'm trying to think, what else did they add? They added the secondary fire toggles. That's a big thing. Like, Borderlands 3, the alternate fire modes though are very cool. I mean, it's very necessary for a lot of guns. Like the taser on some of the pistols is ridiculous. But yeah, for originality overall, I give it an 8. They added a bunch of new stuff into the game to keep it fresh. but I mean, it still sticks to the core gameplay loop. So since it sticks to the main like gameplay loop of Borderlands games and most looter shooters, although it added a bunch of stuff, I still docked it 2 points. It gets an 8 out of 10, which I think is pretty fair. Okay, so after originality, the next category is difficulty. And difficulty kind of is like, it's not how hard the game is or how easy the game is, but I rate it based on like how easy it is for a player to hop on the game and like play the game. And as it progresses, the game gets progressively hard, but the player can get used to that. And Borderlands 3, I think they did a pretty good job on this because, I mean, nobody actually cares about the easier medium mode that it says at the start, because everybody just plays it on medium or whatever it's called. It's just a normal game mode, or normal difficulty, I guess I should say rather. But as Borderlands 3 goes out the story gets progressively harder and you get progressively better loot. I was about to say gooder, that would have been bad, but you get progressively better loot. Like at the start, you get a white weapon, maybe you can find a green, but as you level up and go through the game, your build develops, and you can kind of pick any playstyle you want until endgame, which, I mean, endgame, even if you get the correct loot, you can still make a good build, even if you want to do something that's off meta. But as the story progresses, the difficulty gets significantly harder, but the player can adjust to that by just getting better loot, and the better loot kind of comes to you naturally as you go through the story. Quest rewards and side missions also make it a lot easier, but side missions aren't really required in this game compared to Borderlands 2, where I think the biggest struggle in Borderlands 2 was doing the damn fine rescue mission, and like you were level 7 unless you did side missions, and like the mission difficulty was a 12. That doesn't happen in Borderlands 3. The biggest issue with Borderlands 3 is the fact that when you're going through the story, you're gonna get bored, and that's we're going to talk about that later on, but the difficulty normally is pretty easy and it's pretty balanced throughout the entire story. And this could also be due to the Qualification mode. Along with Qualification, Borderlands 3 also introduced Mayhem mode, which it's pretty much like OP levels, but it's not the same because OP levels had a big difference that they were not based on luck. Mayhem mode is all based on luck and how your rerolls go. You can reroll as many times as you like, but nobody wants to sit there for an hour trying to get the perfect modifiers. And that was one of the big issues with Mayhem mode when it comes out. Although they have added Mayhem 11, which makes it so there are no modifiers, but the game is still more difficult. You still get better loot, but so that's why I would rate difficulty for Borderlands 3 a 9 out of 10. Because as you play the game, it gets more difficult, and the story progressively gives you better loot. However, I'm docking a point because Mayhem mode at the start was way too RNG based. Alright, so now we're going to talk about progression, which is a big factor in Borderlands 3. Almost all characters have multiple action skills, and they have at least 3 skill trees. If you buy the second season pass for the, what is it, like 5th DLC, you get an extra skill tree, and your character develops as you go through this skill tree. You can build your character however you want, and you can progress however you want. To suit your playstyle, like as Zane players, you can use a shield, you can use an arm cannon, you can use a drone, you can use a clone. All of these are really cool, and as you go through the game, you upgrade them and basically make your character how you want them. And in Borderlands 3, there's not really gun progression, I wouldn't say. I mean, you go from like getting whites at the start of the game to getting like purples and stuff, and then eventually at the end of the game, you kind of need to grind out for legendaries. That everybody that played Borderlands 2 knows that that's the gameplay loop. But progression stands out a lot in Borderlands 3 compared to the other games because the skill trees are much more diverse and they added augments. And the augments basically allow you to change your build to cater more towards your playstyle. Even though there's only a few skills, there are several augments to create even more possibilities. Your progression will start whenever you start the game. You'll start off as a level 1. You get your action skill once you're level 2 and you complete basically the tutorial mission. Then as you go through the story and complete main missions and side missions, you'll level up, giving you skill points to basically create whatever build you want. Once you finish the main story for the first time, you'll be around level 30. And if you choose to do True Vault Hunter mode and go through the story again, you'll hit level 50. Now, the only issue is, The level cap currently is level 65. So from level 50 to level 65, you can crank up mayhem mode. You can do whatever you want to get to level 65. Now the issue is this grind may be a lot longer than some people expect. If you have DLC 1, the easiest way is just to kill a bunch of scrap traps over and over again. However, not everybody has DLC 1, so there's this huge gap where you kind of need to find something to do. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can get your guardian ranks and all that stuff, but that's the only kind of issue I have with progression. But since I have DLC 1, it really doesn't cause a hassle for me because it takes like 2 minutes to get to level 65 from 50. Now also, once you hit level 65, the main gameplay aspect that you'll be using is mayhem mode. You're going to be wanting to grind out the rest of your gear and anointments, and the easiest way to do that is by cranking up your mayhem mode to 10 or 11. 10 has the greatest rewards, but you have to like revolve around random modifiers, which is not very fun for some people. Mayhem 11 is also a good way to kind of farm your gear. I mean, it's not as effective as Mayhem 10, but if you don't like randomness, then Mayhem 11 is the way to go. Endgame is where Borderlands progression truly shines, because at the end of Borderlands 3, you kind of want to make your build so you can take down the final tasks, which are like takedowns. I mean, you can complete all the side missions. There's plenty of content to do. And I think most people at the end of the game kind of try to make as many builds as they like and try to make the best builds they like. At least that's what I do. I try to create a build like each time a new update comes out that caters to a different playstyle, which is really cool because in a lot of games like Borderlands, I mean, you don't really have all these possibilities. I mean, but Borderlands has endless possibilities because they're always nerfing and buffing weapons. I mean, not nerfing so much anymore, but they did off at the start, and then people complained. But now they're just buffing weapons, and it kind of makes a lot more play styles really possible, which is really good because a lot of the characters at the start were kind of mediocre. I mean, Flak at the start was kind of unplayable in my opinion because he had no shield, he had nothing. You could barely survive on that man in hard like Mayhem 10. But now that they added all these anointments, all these new content, the progression has like reached the maximum. So that is why I'm giving progression a 10 for Borderlands 3. Progression in Borderlands 3 is the best out of all the Borderlands series. But you can argue for Borderlands 2, but it got boring after a while of doing OP levels or just leveling your character. Because that stretch from 61 to 72 after Ultimate Vault Hunter was one of the most boring stretches ever. And in Borderlands 3 you don't have that stretch because you can do anything you want to level up. That is a major aspect. I mean, they added arms race, which is another fun way to just play the game and level up because it's random every time you do it. So that's why it's a 10. It deserves a 10, and anything less I would just feel like it's not justified. The next category we're going to be addressing is replayability. And replayability was a major strong point in Borderlands 2. I mean, Borderlands 2 was probably one of the most replayable games for me of all time. But Borderlands 3 lacks in this aspect, and that's part of the reason because the story is so long. And I'm not gonna lie, the story isn't as great as Borderlands 2. Borderlands 3's story is pretty lacking, and as you go through the missions, you get sick and tired of just talking to Lilith and repeating the same missions just for Ava. The 35-hour long, just about 35 hours campaign is so unplayable after you do it the first time. Because you gotta understand that if you do it the first time, then you're gonna do it again for True Vault Hunter on that character. And if you don't choose to do True Vault Hunter mode, you're missing out on some other content. But if you make another character, you're spending another 35 hours. And if you make all 4 of the Vault Hunters, you're spending just about 280 hours on the campaign by just going through normal mode and True Vault Hunter mode, which is way too long. It's way too long because the campaign is not as good as Borderlands 2, and in Borderlands 2 there was three pretty much modes: the normal mode, True Vault Hunter mode, and Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. All of which were alright to play through because each time you played through them, your character was kind of different. In Borderlands 3 there's a lot more progression, but in Borderlands 2 the story was more fun to play through. The missions weren't as tedious as Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3, half of this time you'll be spending talking to Lilith, talking to Ava, or running down to the drop pod. And that's just unnecessary. You could cut off about 5 hours from the story if you took that out solely. And although each character is different and they're fun to play through each time, I will say all the 4 Vault Hunters are pretty much fun every time you go through the story on them. It's kind of the story that's lacking in replayability. It's not so much the characters. So that's why I'm rating replayability a 6 out of 10, which I believe is fair for this game, considering it's a huge downgrade from Borderlands 2 under the replayability department. Alright, so now we're going to address the elephant in the room, which is the story of Borderlands 3. Starting off with the characters. And I'm not gonna lie, the characters in Borderlands 3 were some of the worst we've ever seen from the series, or like just from Gearbox alone, because Borderlands 1, Tales from the Borderlands, and Borderlands 2 all had great characters. Now Borderlands 3, it had some pretty bad characters. They didn't introduce many characters, and the characters they introduced that we liked, like Lorelei and even Clay, they completely just didn't focus on whatsoever, and they chose to focus on Ava. It was a character that not many people liked because it was just a kid who basically got like half of the cast killed that everybody liked. So, like, I mean, if you're gonna kill off all the characters we like, obviously we're not gonna like the story that much because the characters we like aren't even there speaking at all. Half of the story is just us talking to Lilith, who's a great character, but half of the time it's just some nonsense or just like a reel shown on the screen of Sanctuary 3. And I understand that some characters they couldn't add, like Scooter, because of events that happened in Tales from the Borderlands, but they definitely could have focused on some of the other characters besides Ava and just not had to focus on Ava and this whole girl power message. Like, we could have had another message in there, some kind of theme that strayed away from just Ava in general. The whole story is just surrounded by Ava and what Ava wants to do, and nobody really liked that, including me. I thought it was pretty bad listening to Ava almost half of the entire story. I mean, we meet her halfway through the story. The first half of the story is pretty fun in my opinion. I think the recent whole Katagawa area is pretty fun, and I think they're great characters. But I mean, Space Laser Tag is not a very replayable mission, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather play that mission 15 times than listen to Ava for the second half of the story. So that is why I'm giving Borderlands 3 a 4 out of 10 on the characters department. They really could have done a better job. Like Borderlands 2, we saw some of the best characters we've ever seen from a Borderlands game. Like, they reintroduced Dr. Zed, they added possibly one of the best villains we've ever seen in Handsome Jack. But in like Borderlands 3, we don't have that good villain. We have, I mean, two Twitch streamers that constantly are annoying. I mean, the first time I played through the story, I didn't mind them that much. But after hearing God Queen Tyrene for the 15th fucking time, I'm sick and tired of it. I didn't think it was very good. So that, like, 4 out of 10, I think that's pretty justified. Alright, so the next aspect under story is dialogue, which, I mean, it's kind of the interactions between each of the characters in the game. And for Borderlands 3, not gonna lie, half of the dialogue is just talk to Lilith or talk to Ava, so it's not very, the score is not very high, and the most of the dialogue that I liked was between the Vault Hunters and Typhon, which was at the end of the game, and I'm not gonna lie, that kind of section of the story was not very good. I mean, the story aspect was fun, but the gameplay was kind of repetitive. It was kind of just going area to area killing people, but I mean, Typhon kind of made up for it. However, I mean, they just kind of killed Typhon at the end, which was horrible. I mean, Typhon had some of the best voice lines, and the dialogue at that part of the game was at an all-time high because he kind of hinted at his children being the children of the Vault, and kind of like Troy and Tyrene, which, I mean, we could all tell based on the dialogue we heard from him. But it was a great twist kind of in the story, and it made the dialogue of the game overall better. But the first half of the story, the only good dialogue was between Reese and Katagawa. I mean, that dialogue was even kind of corny. But the second half, we didn't really have any good dialogue. Like, I can't even remember any of the dialogue that was actually good. I mean, this dialogue by no means is worse than the pre-sequel, which had some of the worst dialogue I've ever seen. I couldn't even complete that game, that's how bad the dialogue was. But in this game, the dialogue is a huge step down from Borderlands 2. Like, a huge step down. I mean, Handsome Jack had some of the best lines ever in any game, period. Borderlands 3, we don't get any dialogue like that. I mean, the most memorable dialogue I know is from like Vaughn saying he could crush somebody with his abs, and that's about it. So that's why I give dialogue for Borderlands 3 a 5 out of 10. I think it's well deserved that it gets a 5 out of 10 because it was a major step down. The last aspect under story is going to be the setting. And the setting of Borderlands 3 is pretty good, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it takes place after all the events of Tales from the Borderlands, Borderlands 2, and Borderlands 1, and the pre-sequel. I mean, they don't address most of those story issues in those games like directly, but the setting of the game is pretty nice. Like, I mean, the planets are beautiful. Promethea and Athenas really, really are well-designed planets. I wish we were on Athenas more because that is one of my favorite areas of all time in Borderlands. Probably my favorite all time. Like, going through, killing Captain Tron and going into the pyramid was some of the most fun I've had on any area in Borderlands. We also got introduced to the Children of the Vault, which added to the setting. I mean, all their areas look pretty cool. They're just kind of reformed bandits, but they had a little more screen time, and they also added on to the setting a little more. The only thing I don't really like about the setting is the fact that the game is based around just chasing after vault keys and stuff, but it doesn't really make sense. Why don't we just capture the vault key and take it away from them? Why do we go to the vaults and open them? That's the only thing that I'm gonna knock a point off for. But overall, the setting just adds to the story. It doesn't really take much away like the dialogue and the characters did. The setting for most of the planets is really nice. I mean, the story is kind of what's lacking, but that's due to the dialogue and characters. The setting was kind of perfect, and that's why I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I mean, maybe you could say it deserves like a 7 out of 10 for like the dumb stuff that happens on each planet, but I think it deserves a 9 out of 10. The areas were well designed. I mean, if they changed the storyline a bit, it probably would have been better, but I give it a 9 out of 10. And now we're going to take a look at the style of the game, which involves visuals and audio. First off, we're going to look at visuals, which is basically just how good the game looks. And the Borderlands 3 has the same style as Borderlands 2 with the cel-shaded graphics. I mean, we all know and love the cel-shaded graphics. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say we all know, but I like personally the cel-shaded graphics, and I think they did a great job with it in Borderlands 3. The game looks beautiful. Each planet has a kind of a set mood, and especially Promethea. I mean, they could have added more lights and make it look like a neon city with more lights or something like that. But Pandora is just the desert, we all know, but that was the only planet that was kind of lacking in the visuals aspect. But Athenas, on the other hand, is probably the most beautiful planet, in my opinion, out of all the games. I think that planet they struck gold with. That planet has the pyramid, which you go into. They have a various amount of colors, and the nature is popping out. I mean, it's great. The colors of all the enemies in the game are great as well. I mean, the game is very colorful, and overall the game has like a high saturation filter on it. Everything pops out. The guns have so many colors, and they even added weapon skins, which adds to the visuals a little bit. I think this game deserves a 9 out of 10. I'll keep it brief for the visuals because we all know what it looks like. I only took off a point just because they could have added a little more to the visuals of each individual character, like each individual enemy. They could have added a little more color to them. But overall, I would rate it a 9 out of 10. I think it's a very good game visually, and I don't think there's much they can improve on. So that's why I give it a 9 out of 10. I mean, your opinion can differ just because the cel-shaded graphics might not be your type, but I like them a lot, and it deserves a 9 out of 10. Now we're going to stray to the other side of style, which is audio, and audio is just basically how the game sounds, and the sound in each individual sound in the game. And I'm going to be honest, Borderlands 3 has some of the best sounds I've ever heard in the game. I mean, all the guns sound different. I don't know how they did it, but there's like a million guns and each of them sound different. The suppressors on dull weapons are the best sound I've ever heard, like ever. It's the most satisfying sound ever. It makes like a mini ping sound, like on the Jaguar weapons and the Puma weapons. It's amazing. Every headshot, every kill you get makes a satisfying sound. I mean, blowing up barrels makes a satisfying sound. Everything's so satisfying whenever it comes to the audio department. I'm gonna keep the rest of this brief. I think the music in the game is also great. I think they did a great job like blending in between passive and combat music. I think they did a great job in that department. Also, the Sanctuary theme is amazing as well. Because of all of this, I just gave it a 10 out of 10 for audio. I mean, I can't really think of games that sound better than it. I mean, it's a newer title, so that's why the audio sounds so great. But I mean, overall, it's so satisfying. All the sounds are satisfying. All the guns are satisfying to hear. So that's why it deserves the 10 out of 10. Alright, the last category we're going to be talking about is optimization. And there's two individual aspects in this category, bugs and performance. Now, we all know about the Borderlands 3 optimization. It's dog shit. Even now, it's dog shit. It was fucked from the start. I mean, there's so many bugs throughout the game. So many bugs. Like, multiple areas you'll get stuck on. There's so many progression blockers. I can't go through the story without hitting a progression blocker. It's embarrassing. And I'm gonna combine performance into this one too. Performance is horrible. Like, half of my friends couldn't even play the game whenever it first started. I mean, I ran into 20 crashes in my first playthrough of the game whenever the game came out. It's horrible. My FPS drops randomly even to this day. I mean, you can't get a smooth experience in the game. It's pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. And there have also been several issues at the start of the game with aiming. Like, if you aim down your sights, your FPS would drop like 50. I couldn't even aim down in my first playthrough. I had to hip fire snipers, shotguns, SMGs, ARs, you name it. It was not a fun experience based on the performance. So, I won't keep you guys any longer. I'm just going to tell you the bugs were a 4 and the performance are a 3. 4 out of 10 for bugs and performance 3 out of 10. I think that is completely fair considering my friends couldn't even play the game. Like, it was horrible. Like, it's possibly the worst optimization experience I've ever had with the game. And I recommend, if you have a bad computer, don't touch Borderlands 3. Don't even touch it. It will fry your computer completely. Like, your PC will be on flames, like in flames completely. The performance is horrid, so that's why I rate bugs 4 out of 10 and performance 3 out of 10. If you disagree, you can comment all you want, but that will never change my mind, because I just couldn't. My game still crashes to this day, and I have a 1070 Ti and a Ryzen 7 2700X, and that's saying something if the game crashes on this. So to wrap things up, I'm going to tell you guys a bit about the scores, and then I'll add my conclusion. So we're going to start with the statistical score, which for Borderlands 3, that was a 7.0. Now I think this is completely fair considering the story was very lacking and the optimization was very lacking. I mean, the style of the game and the layout and depth were very high. I mean, it had scores of 10 for progression, which I think is completely fair. A 7 statistical score, we can all admit is pretty fair. For my personal score, I gave it a 9 because I've sunk so many hours into this game. Giving anything less than a 9 would just not be fair. I've enjoyed almost every minute I've played of it. That wasn't the game crashing or just talking to Lilith or Ava, but other than that, like 10 hours of the game, I'll take it. I have like 13 days on the game or something ridiculous, so I have to give it a 9 out of 10. And to wrap it up with our final score, the game gets and deserves, in my opinion, an 8. An 8 out of 10 is completely fair for this game. I mean, I'm not going to say it lived up to the hype of Borderlands 2, but I think it definitely did, the layout and depth-wise. I mean, the replayability wasn't there, and the story wasn't there. The visuals were, and the audio was. The optimization wasn't there. But, I mean, you had the progression, difficulty, and originality of the game. I mean, they kind of innovated in any way they could possibly. They did a poor job on the story, which was something we knew and loved, but they did come out and give us a lot of new guns, legendaries, and unique weapons that we all love to this day. And Borderlands 3 has some of the most significant and important legendaries we'll ever see, and some of the most important and significant characters. Although they might not be good characters, and they might not have good dialogue, the setting was still there. I mean, the game looks beautiful, the game sounds beautiful, but the optimization was lacking. I mean, half of the time I couldn't see those visuals because the game was frozen, but that's why the final score is an 8. An 8 out of 10 I think is perfectly fair, and for my first review of a game, I think Borderlands 3 was a great game to pick because, I mean, although it might have been controversial at the start, I think it's kind of grown into a game that the DLC has improved. A lot of, I mean, the Season Pass and Season Pass 2 were kind of controversial. I don't think it was a good idea to have 2 Season Passes. I don't think any game should ever have 2 Season Passes. Because I dropped $100 on the Ultimate Edition. And this is kind of me just rambling at them. But I dropped $100 on the Ultimate Edition just to not get all the DLC. Which I believe is the dumbest idea ever. I mean, I don't regret buying the second Season Pass because they added a lot more content, which I think most games don't even add in one DLC, but Borderlands 3 improved on the game with DLC. The events are great. The difficulty throughout the game is great. I think it's a great game. I think anybody who wants a game to grind or just a looter shooter in general, Borderlands 3 is the best option on the market now. No doubt. It's gonna be a great game in the future, and it's gonna last for a long time. I mean, they're consistently updating it and creating new content for the game, so it'll be around and it's here to stay. I mean, it's not going anywhere. You saw how long Borderlands 2 lasted. Borderlands 3 is looking to last just as long, maybe a little bit shorter. But thanks for watching this video. Hopefully there's more reviews in the future. Comment down below which game you want me to review next. I mean, I've played several games. Just If you know me and you wanted to see a game that I've played and you've played, just comment that game below and I'll be sure to review it. These videos take a long time, so I'd appreciate if you leave a like, and if we reach 5 likes, I'll release another review if somebody comments another game down below.